Hello friends, and welcome to the Storyteller's Guide on Gilding Light, where we take adventure storytelling to the next level. Here we'll show you how easy it is to create compelling stories by building adventures with game masters. Some of our game masters have been telling stories for decades, while others have just started their writing journey. We want to help you level up your skill set to become better storytellers. I'm Satine Phoenix, your story guide for today's Storyteller's Guide episode called Starting a Quest. We are surrounded by stories every day, no matter where we go. Music uses sound to take you on a journey of emotion. Graphic design on packaging uses shapes and colors to create a moment of a story you connect with to purchase an item. Carefully placed words and photos communicate efficiently a story on billboards for movies and TV advertisements. Stories are told in more than simply movies and novels. When you know where to look, you'll be flooded with inspiration to tell your own story. I was playing Idle Champions when inspiration hit. I've been playing D&D for 30 years, a DM for almost 10, and while playing this game, I realized I was incredibly inspired by the boldness of their adventures and by the way they used monsters in the game. By watching another storytelling, I had to be honest with myself about how stagnant I'd become in my creativity, especially in encounters. I took a look at what made their game so exciting and tried to understand it in a way that translates to my own storytelling and writing and gaming. The big questions are, why are your characters here? Why do they do what they do? Why do they care? No matter what viewpoint you write from, every character has a need in their life. This is especially important to think about when you're writing for RPGs, as you don't have control over the characters' responses at the table. The writer has to know what the drive is of each character and what pulls the individual characters into the story as a team. If you, the writer, are writing an adventure to sell with adventurers you might never play with, it's imperative to understand what generally drives archetypes even more. As a live game master, I have to think about story engagement within the party and how it comes across to the audience with no editing. Using skills my peers and I have developed will help you fine-tune your adventure and storytelling. Pillars of adventure. In the most basic of ideas, the fighter wants to fight their way through things, a bard might want to clever their way through a situation, while a ranger may want to explore up and around to find a solution to the problem at hand. These three ideas are explored in the pillars of adventure: social, exploration, and combat. They're important because the balance of these pillars in your adventure will satisfy the group by raising the likelihood of engagement from your players or lead characters and provide a more dynamic story for all to enjoy. Scenes aren't linear. You walk into a room, there's a treasure, you walk to the treasure, you fight the hidden monster with your sword, defeat it, and then get to the treasure. How boring of a story would that be? By thinking about all the different ways to attain the treasure based on the capabilities of a well-rounded party of people, you can make a more interesting story. A story that feels real because of the dangers and possibilities. That's what we're looking for when we play these games and read these stories. We want obstacles. We want to overcome these obstacles for a sense of victory. Let's dive into the different pillars and consider the aspects of them in your story. For this example, we'll use a dragon. You pick the color. And this dragon is guarding its most precious treasure, the realm's largest pearl of power. Let's say their name is Largo. Largo the dragon with the great pearl of power. In this scene, Largo has a need to protect their treasure. Why? What did Largo do to gain this pearl? What did Largo have to sacrifice in order to get this pearl? How important is it that Largo keep this pearl? What kind of environment did they keep the pearl in? Does Largo live in a cave, a castle, a tower? Is it hidden amongst many treasures? Is it put on display for use of some sort? Is it placed high up in the room or deep in the protective well? What does it represent to Largo? Will Largo fight to the death? Will Largo preempt defeat by offering an exchange? Does Largo have friends around to help protect the pearl? Can the characters bypass Largo or convince Largo to part ways with the pearl? By asking these kinds of questions, you begin to understand the various ways your characters or players might attempt to retrieve the treasure and how the creature can become the obstacle. Combat. In a combat scenario, you aren't just creating a creature obstacle for the players to fight to the death. You create a creature whose need is to prevent the players from attaining the end goal by force. How will the creature underestimate the party in the beginning? How will the creature show its power? Is this the kind of creature who fights first or attempts to scare the adventurers away? Do they put all of their heavy spells and attacks out first? Answers to these questions define the attitude of the creature while in combat. A bold creature who throws all of their heavy attacks first might cower by the end of the adventure, having underestimated the characters, and such, beg for its life. Think of the weaknesses of a creature who is so focused on protecting its treasure. Allow your characters the chance to perceive these vulnerabilities. You might have a really intense dragon, but maybe there's that one scale out of place that has a direct line to its heart you can only see from a certain vantage point, and only if you're really lucky. Maybe the characters notice something about the environment that gives the creature away, something in the traps it is set to get here, or in how it protects this area of its lair. When running combat encounters, think about the various ways the players might want to attack. Ranged bow attacks, ranged spell, melee, acrobatic melee. Do they fight in plain sight or hidden using shadows? In this case, the rogue might want to climb something in order to ride the giant dragon and attack it from above. Think of the various ways the characters can use the environment and the attitude of the creature to defeat it. Provide opportunities that will satisfy the different kinds of characters and inspire them to come up with clever ways around a situation. Exploration. Exploring Largo's lair should reveal a lot about them. Why they traveled this far to seclude themselves away, and what kind of creatures did you have to defeat in order to get here? What kind of traps were detected, and how are they disabled? Were they haphazardly put together, or are they ancient, using magics not seen for a millennia? Fill the path with story for your characters to puzzle together in order to reveal who they're about to attempt to defeat. Allow the characters to discover. This is an excellent example of the pillar of exploration. Through exploring, you have the chance to show, not tell your characters the history of a place or thing, which is a key element of storytelling. We aren't here to tell our characters facts. We are here to allow the facts to be revealed. We storytellers are facilitating the sense of wonder that stories provide. Through the reveal, the character will come to their own conclusion of what to do when they meet Largo, and further, how to respond when they interact. How much information and what kind of information given also can be determined by how the party explores. Maybe they get 3/4 of the information, leading to a certain string of assumptions that when they confront Largo, they realize consequences of their assumptions. This is how you can play a story over and over and have it experienced in different ways. This pillar has the opportunity to give a lot of depth to a story. Social. Largo is a creature, and this creature does not exist in a vacuum. Along with the pearl, Largo has a dragon's hoard of treasure and a place to put it in. How did they attain these? What have they done in the past to protect it? How many other adventurers have they come in contact with? What worked for Largo? What didn't work? And how will Largo react to your adventures because of it? Will Largo react the same way to different attempts? In our social pillar, the adventurers get to attempt to use the information they've gathered about Largo through getting there and within Largo's lair, as well as their skill sets to interact with Largo in a non-combat way, possibly convincing Largo to part ways with the pearl. This is not limited to discussion. This could be using spells in ways that might affect the creature's senses. This could be using skills to change the environment or shifting perspective of Largo. The main focus is non-combat interaction to figure out how to get what you want. Now Largo and their pearl are vibrant and dynamic. I encourage you to ask questions because within the answers are honest reflections of story depth. Now, with this knowledge of pillars, you can begin to understand how the characters can work together. Back to what I saw in Idle Champions. The formation of the characters encourage their working together for the goal of the scene. Different formations based on the environment allow for all to participate, and that is what makes for a fun story. How do the characters work together? Further, how do the characters find ways to work together even though some might be doing it for selfish reasons? In role-playing, when each character gets a chance to participate, it inspires the characters to then build on the previous idea, and with complete engagement, and you begin to really experience group storytelling at its best. When a player feels a scene doesn't have something for them, they begin to disconnect, and it makes the shared story experience slow down. It's in the connectedness of the group that ideas begin to fly, and the real play feeling begins. This volley of ideas gives the group permission to open their imaginations to each other. Suddenly, they seem to believe the story, and in their mind's eye, have a clearer picture of the game. Make sure you have these pillar notes readily available so you as a storyteller are able to quickly maneuver with all these answers when the characters are in the heat of the scene. Having to stop and search for information slows down the rhythm of the game as well as breaks engagement. Find an organizational program that works for you. Myself, I'm a huge fan of hyperlinks and dynamic maps, so I use worldanvil.com as a storyteller for writing a book or campaign notes and scripting. Engagement in story is especially important to new players who are already nervous about gaming. They come to the table with a need to experience a sense of success and that they're a part of something. Building adventures for beginner groups is a good exercise in writing to remind even the most veteran storyteller how to set up their story concisely so people can jump in with confidence. NPCs. We talked about character engagement based on the pillars of adventure and storytelling. Now, let's talk about a more practical mechanic to get your players to engage in the story. The Quest Giver. The very first character we meet in the Idle Champions adventures is Bruenor Battlehammer. He's an important character in the D&D world with novels of experience, and him being an adventuring veteran makes him a good character for new beginner adventurers to trust. The history he comes with can be passed on in tidbits he shares to the party, building the world through experience rather than an info dump at the beginning of the game. In our Largo adventure, think about how the characters might have learned about the pearl, who they might be working for, or who they're trying to protect by retrieving this pearl. Who would they have trusted enough to go on this quest? This NPC can be a veteran, a wise sage, or a wizard, a wealthy noble, or a politician. The primary thing to think about is what is it about this NPC, non-player character, that the party as a whole trusts? What kind of experience have they had that convinced the adventurers to risk their lives? Once you figure out the NPC story, you can start to express how the characters know these facts. Is it in the clothes they wear or how people around them treat the NPC? Do they have shiny new or old and haggard medals on their uniform? What specifically is it about the NPC that expresses to the characters this is the person to buy into? Dress, mannerisms, respect or disrespect from the locals? When logging these NPC details into your world building program, consider coordinating the character profiles like you can do in World Anvil to make sure your pillars and NPC quest givers appeal to the character's motivations. This goes for both novels and RPGs. Let us begin. All this talk on storytelling has me roaring to start this adventure. After this quick video, we'll be back with our guest and begin our quest here on the Storyteller's Guide. But first, we want to thank our partner Idle Champions. You can find them and my character Vlanya Umvara on idlechampions.com and on Steam, PS4, Xbox, and iPad. And thank you to our sponsor World Anvil, a brilliant way to organize world building for novels and your gaming campaigns. That's worldanvil.com. One of the biggest problems that storytellers face while in session is that when you're searching through your notes and books, you're breaking the flow of the game. World Anvil allows you to manage your lore, the stat blocks of your PCs, NPCs, and monsters, your music, handouts, and so much more from a single screen. Fill your maps with lore and bring your worlds to life by connecting locations, NPCs, races, and monsters to the lands of your world with interactive maps. Track the history of your world, the adventures of your party, and all your major NPCs with timelines. World Anvil is not just for D&D 5e, it supports any other game you want, since you can build stat blocks in any system you're running and play your campaign in it, as every proper homebrew tool should aim to do. Oh, and you can make your own system too. Create an account now at worldanvil.com and join the World Builders Guild. Use the code Storyteller for a whopping up to 30% off Master and Grandmaster memberships. That's worldanvil.com. Welcome back! I'm super excited to introduce today's guest. We have Brennan Mulligan, the cast member of College Humor and Dungeon Master of Dimension 20, and Zach Eubank, CCO and founder of Hyper RPG. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
Before we start, I want to know, how long have you guys been DMing and what kind of games do you usually run?
So I have been running games of D&D since I was 10 years old. It's been 21 years. I love 5e. I've got a big place in my heart for 3.5, but I've also played and run Call of Cthulhu, Unknown Armies, Shadowrun, a lot of World of Darkness. Love World of Darkness. I mostly DM and have for the past 21 years.
So long!
So long.
I am the complete opposite end of that spectrum. I've only been GMing for about 2.5 years, and only first even learned of role-playing games when I hit up Matt Mercer to do Critical Role. That was my first exposure. And but I've been a storyteller my whole life and absolutely fell super deep into storytelling and RPGs. But I primarily run a lot of indie systems like the Q system, Tin Candles, Kids on Bikes, lots and lots of really dark and deep indie type systems.
Cool. What are your favorite aspects for creating games?
Favorite aspect? Mine's the world building. I love world building. I love dreaming up new places to go and coming up with as many branching story paths as possible and setting players in that and seeing how they explore that world.
Are you guys ready to create an adventure?
Oh, hell yeah.
Sure. Yes.
Good, because that's what we're doing. We're doing it right now. Okay. So we're going to use these elements. It's a beginner adventure.
Great.
We're going to create a quest that satisfies all three pillars of adventure: exploration, combat, and social. It's level 1 training wheels. And an adventure that establishes history, terrain, and tone of a fantasy game without the upfront info dump. So that's the hard part of all of this. But I think it'll be really cool to try to figure out how to weave that in.
Gotcha. So there's no Galadriel giving us the whole history of the last alliance of elves and men.
I would like for all of us to move on from that. Because essentially this goes more about storytelling than just creating an adventure to play in a game. Mm-hmm. So being able to utilize story creation for novels or graphic novels or movies into adventures that we can play also.
Sweet. Okay,
so I'm going to be taking notes here, and we are going to start right about meow.
Okay. So
Where
if we're
do you guys start?
An adventure, typically I would start with location, especially if we're wanting to not go for a big info dump. Mm-hmm. I feel like location, if I can describe that location well, it can help set the tone and the place and kind of the general gist of what we're going for pretty easily.
I can dig it.
Yeah.
I typically like to start with a piece of information that we might have to make up, which is who our players are. I think I would make a very different campaign for work buddies who are playing for the first time than I would for my old home game crew.
True.
Oh,
very true.
Nice.
So to me, there's a lot of storytelling, which is always about, comes from my comedy background, which is you gotta know your room. So what the character of the people I'm playing with is. I don't know if we want to invent that.
Yeah, let's invent it right now. Ready, go.
Cool.
Heck yeah.
Who do you think? Who's at our table?
Maybe it's first level, maybe a bunch of cool friends and colleagues who are maybe playing for the very first time. So they want that classic hit of high fantasy. I often find when I'm playing with people that I've played with for decades, they're like, give me something weird. Let's do a pulp noir cyberpunk. Yep. I got to get a weird thing to get the same feeling. And when people are playing for the first time, they're like, I just want to be an elf.
Yeah.
I just want to be an elf with a bow and arrow.
So they just got done watching Game of Thrones and let's do this.
Business professionals.
Mm-hmm.
So we have business professionals starting to play because they want to be elves or dwarves or whatnot.
So we might have to ease them in a little bit. You don't want to go right out of the gate. We're gonna have to gently lead them in.
A little toe into the water for the first time, a nice slow entry.
All right, so let's go to location then. We know who we're making this for. Where are we making this?
Well, this is going to be a question, I think, mainly for you. I'm going to be very upfront, very ignorant to the worlds of D&D and those kinds of places. High fantasy, not so much, so it's like different locales that are more generic for sure. But in the regards to, D&D type worlds, I'm anxious to hear what you have to say in regards to what are good entry points there. I'm curious.
So here's what I would say. I think good entry, well, the classic is always we meet in a tavern, which is just near and dear to everybody's heart. But I think there's a reason for that, which is if you are allowing your PCs to make any character that springs to their imagination, often you gather together a kind of motley crew of individuals.
For sure.
So if your entry point is a remote desert island where no one ever comes, then it's going to be extra straining on suspension of disbelief to be like, and we've got a tiefling bard, a dwarven paladin, an elven cleric, so I think often starting in like a roadside tavern on a well-traveled highway, sort of like civic metropolis that would have lots of different people, or if you want to start more wilderness encounter, having some place where there's been like a war, or there were different adventurers that were called here, or some bulletin was posted in like some equivalent of the Harpers so that people know that there's something going on here. So I would say like a tavern's a good place to start. So is like Adventurers Guild or a big civic metropolis. So those would be my three.
Do you typically, if we're imagining this situation where it's just our friends coming together, do we imagine that we've had time to talk to each of them before we started a little bit about their characters, or are we just kind of going in?
I always love us. Now, this is actually because Satine, I know that Satine likes people to create their characters themselves to exactly express what they want to do. I tend to like to do a session 0 where we all create collaboratively, but I think it's all groovy, whatever you want to do.
I kind of go both ways. Either if it's depending on the outcome of what they want, maybe have them all together and thinking about how they're bonded to each other. So that helps me as a GM be able to put them in situations where I can quickly create a scenario that I know will bring up something from their past and make the rest of the table like them, or work one-on-one with each individual to kind of be like, what's don't give me your full backstory, but what's a little bit about, if we're going to start here, what maybe brought you here. I like that idea of like a war council or something like that maybe brought them. I like to imagine for all the other players at the table, if I'm introducing one player, I want to make the other players at the table audience members and being excited to find out about the other players. So maybe knowing just a little bit more about them and getting to introduce them in a cool way with a little bit of their, like, how they come in and how they're introduced to the room to help the other players get excited about each other.
And since this is a beginning adventure for beginning players, so maybe why don't we say that the characters that they're playing are quasi already created.
Okay,
like
cool.
Pre-gens,
like pre-gens,
that they can kind of fill in the blanks for personality.
Awesome. My suggestion for a starting location, I think that when you're first starting playing, you have first level characters, often there's people that are playing for the very first time. I think people want that classic thing of traveling through the dark woods to find a dungeon, maybe with some cool low challenge rating monsters out there somewhere. What about a big history-filled, not that we're going to info dump on them, roadside tavern in between two metropolises that have been at war variously for a long time.
So you create a conflict right there. One of them might be from one city, one might be from the other.
Exactly. So people can improvise history. They can go like, oh, I'm from this other place that went here. So this tavern has kind of been a no man's land in a wilderness that has seen shifting borders of war.
Somebody
before.
at the table's got to be from that wilderness too. So you have the wilderness in between of how they're affected by the war on both sides. Sets up all your conflicts.
If someone's a druid or a ranger, they can be like, I just speak for the forest, and this war has been bad for the forest for a long time. That feels like a lot of classic, really rich, tasty fantasy tropes that people would love to play.
And I think those tropes are really important. Tropes, I don't think, are a bad thing, especially with early level players. You want them to feel like they're in their favorite movie or their favorite show to get them into it quickly. I think
1,000%. 1,000% agree.
Okay, so we have the location. Very clever, guys. That's you get inspiration.
Yes.
All right, so that is a really good way to do the tone, the the terrain and to get history, right? You've got different people talking with the different tavern employees, that other people at the tavern. So what is the adventure?
Well, it's a fetch quest, right? Typically a level 1.
Level 1 fetch quest.
Fetch quest. Somebody in that bar is gonna be like, I need something. Who here can do it? Oh, look at these adventurers. I'll give you some gold. Get out of here. Go get the thing.
And I think it makes a lot of sense too, because if you have a situation, and for me, I always like to think about how do we root the stakes of the adventure in elements of the world that the PCs will care about. So I think you go, okay, if this tavern is at a halfway point, in the little village around the tavern is at a halfway point between two warring powers, we know that there has been a lot of chaos in this land.
Yeah.
We know that fortresses and ruins cropped up, and we know that if a war kind of subsided, you have lots of classic D&D monsters like goblins or kobolds that could rush in as scavengers to pick the loot of the end of chaos, or like the fall of a certain situation. So maybe there's fetch quests like, hey, these armies receded, scavengers came in, and now we have some important magical item or some other significant thing happening out in this ruined fortress outside.
You gotta go find it. I like giving some sort of element of importance to that item that goes back into whatever backstory they're improving. I think it's important to make sure whatever devices you create, being loose enough with those devices to say, all right, let's see how the table plays out. If they start deciding they're all for this one city, or they want the war to stop, then this is the one item that could stop the war. And if you get it and present it, it will create, it will there's no more conflict. It's all good. But if they want one side or the other to win, or half the party wants one side or one or the other, and you tell them this will be the thing that turns the tide of the war, then you create some internal conflict that makes it really fun about where the story might go.
I love that. And it's cool too. I'll throw something out to get specific. Maybe the magic, there's like a powerful magic item there that is a like tattered but glorious standard for one of the armies. It was like a magical morale creating, like rallying standard banner that would be really significant. Whichever side you were on, you'd either want to get the other side's or your own. And if you're one of those like non-aligned wilderness people, maybe the fact that these goblins or kobolds have picked it up and grabbed it, they are using its magic to like conquer the forest. So you'd have a vested interest in either side just getting it out of your forest.
And you know there's going to be at least one player at the table, being level 1 adventurers, who's going to be like, I light it on fire and destroy it so no one gets it. And that's going to happen.
Yeah, right.
So how do you have your safeguards in place for that? And how do you say yes but also have a backup situation of what the conflict resolution might be if that happens?
the banner's on fire, and now it's even more badass, and the magic is more powerful.
Yeah, totally.
Look what you've done!
The flame never stops burning. Oh no!
It's super magic. Okay, so those are amazing elements. Why don't we dig into the actual structure of the adventure? And remember, we have to include the 3 pillars of adventure: exploration, combat, and social in each of the different segments. Say it's 3 acts.
Cool.
Okay. Well, I think we got Act 1, introductions, right? Get to know everybody, get your adventure, and then we start on our quest. I'm curious because, again, I feel like the structure of the indie game world and the D&D world, I've watched so much D&D, but I haven't structured much of it. What do you like to do for your second act?
I think, first act, introduction, heavy social element in the tavern. I think one thing you also need to realize is like combat and like social / exploration are 2 legs working on the same body. Totally. So each step is propelling and advancing the next step of the other type you're going to take. So I think if you're doing the social roleplay exploration component, the thing you're also trying to do sneakily is build tension and dread and stakes for when the next combat encounter happens. So I think going into the second act, maybe we've done introductions in the tavern, I would add a social role-playing element where maybe some military commander is speaking to a village elder in the place with this tavern. Maybe the town is so small that the village elder is just the barkeep of the tavern. It's like, hey, we don't have a town hall. We just run town business out of the front room of the bar. Yeah. And you have some commander, some like grizzled dwarven, battle commander talking to the barkeep, and she's going like, we know that there's things out in the woods that have started to creep in, and they say, listen, it's part of the treaty we signed. I'm pulling my men out of here. We're leaving town.
So you're leaving the town unguarded.
You're leaving the town unguarded, and there's immediate state where it sounds like a good thing, like, oh, good, the army's leaving. And then suddenly you realize, like, oh, that actually has real significance. And now some stakes are being created as the townsfolk say, what are we going to do? Because we know that these goblins or kobolds or whatever have moved in outside of town. And the commander says, good luck with that.
And I feel like in that situation, I love that setup. And that's where I would be as a GM at the table. Right when I'm bringing those things to element, I would start trying to see how my players were reacting to that. If they got super gung-ho, then I'd push the story forward immediately and have them go reach out for that conflict and combat very quickly. But if it feels like they're still a little on the fence, I think sitting in it in a moment, allowing the tension and the stakes to build, allow the nightfall to come, the soldiers have left, you start to hear the howls outside of town, people screaming, and it's like you now have to make a decision. You have to make a decision. You can't just sit here. You have to move forward.
I love that. So I would say going into the second act, first combat encounter, I would throw, and I would also add an exploration element to this. Yeah. I think it could be really cool if they get to the wilderness and see that the wilderness has been changed or warped by the years of conflict. Maybe one side of the battle was very arcane or had a lot of sorcerers in their army, and we see a weird warped piece of forest.
Oh, that's so cool.
That has like grown up. Maybe there were like dwarven tanks or like machine elements, and then the other side had some sorceress or druidic magic. So we see that trees have grown up and reclaimed, and there's like old dwarven golems or machines stuck out of these trees, and they can explore like how the machines have been reclaimed by this wood and this weird alien landscape. I'll throw some wargs at them.
All right.
I'm trying to remember what challenge.
Tell me what that is, because I'm that unversed.
Hell yeah! Wargs are classically sort of wolf, lupine creatures.
Okay.
Depending on your situation, they're either more purely wolves, or sometimes they are truly like goblinoid wolves, depending on how you skin them in your D&D campaign. But they're really good. They for a first level party, they're kind of powerful. So if you have more than one of them, you're definitely going to be looking at like a very difficult combat encounter. So I might. For first level characters, change that up with advantages in the terrain that avail themselves to them. Maybe they can climb up to shelves on these like old reclaimed dwarven machines in the forest and fire on them with ranged weapons. But to me, if we have goblins out in this castle somewhere that are ready to move in as the army leaves, sending a long patrol of very fast wargs out there, be like, go scout, check the village out. And having your first combat encounter be something that's like fast and scary that would be out in the wilderness on your way to this more fortified place.
And this is, I guess, a personal taste kind of question there. In regards to those first combats, I typically like in all of my RPGs in episode 1, if I know that it's going to go further than one episode, or if I think this is a first play test, let's see how they dig it, and I want to hook them, I want them to feel more excited, maybe I overpower them in that first encounter, let one or two kind of like feel like, oh man, it's again a question of your group. If I think this group needs to feel some confidence boost, make it easy. But in that moment, if they're really cocky, like knock them down a peg and then have an NPC kind of swoop in to show them what they can be, you know, what the future holds if they keep moving forward down this path, and the NPC might save them or help out in a way, not too Deus Ex Machina, but at least to set up a situation where there's stakes here, you're over your head, you need to be careful, and if you go in wild, guns blazing all the time, you're not going to come out of the situation safe.
I totally agree.
So how do you satisfy the different needs from the different players in this instance?
I think that one thing you should remember is that first level characters being played by veteran players are totally different than first level characters being played by brand new players. And as we've established that we have brand new players, you should reckon as a DM that people are going to make some non-optimal moves as they're learning their character. People might drop and get down to 0 just through not understanding action economy or tactics or movement, things like that. And so what I would probably do is give them an encounter that feels really scary, because I think that your encounters should run on the deadly side. Encounters that are easy difficulty are not necessarily that rewarding for people that have been watching Game of Thrones and are playing D&D for the first time and are assuming that every single combat should be deadly, right? But what I would do is I think I would have an encounter that feels scary and has a lot of forgiving elements to it. They're fighting in this weird reclaimed battlefield of forest. Cool. If one of them wants to, there's like a weird dwarven tank they can activate that'll do some insane amount of damage that a first level character shouldn't be able to do.
Only got one shot.
Because it's creative and fun, and it can't follow them to another battle, right? Maybe there's a chest of healing potions somewhere so that if they survive with a couple of dropped party members, they can rush over, find this thing that's like an old reclaimed first aid kit from the army that was here, bring their friends back up. So I think you want to balance and keep in mind that beginning players are not going to make optimal choices.
Zach, what kind of elements from indie games can you put into something like this? I know you don't do a lot of combat, but I feel like your brain could really add to this.
Yeah, it's definitely... A lot of the systems I play don't have combat in the system, but what they do have is conflict. And I was thinking about emotional conflict and thinking about... And that's why I would make sure I had a one-on-one with each person before we play, and even ask them straight up, like, what do you hope to get out of this? Like, why do you get excited about this idea of sitting at a table with your friends and playing this game? What do you want? And I'm always amazed at the different things people tell me. I've never probably got the same answer. It's so interesting because you build an idea in your head of what you want. And then thinking about how can I create something exciting for them through conflict? What are their goals as a character? How can I put those goals in sight, but make them very difficult to reach? And how can I make an opposing party member have opposing goals and create some conflict there, but not in a way where they hate each other, in a way that they might see that this is going to be a problem down the line if we don't communicate and we don't come to terms with each other and make sure that we talk things out and finding creative solutions to those problems. That's my most favorite part about GMing, is seeing, like, it's almost like you're matchmaking. You're putting together, like, ooh, I'm going to put this here and I'm going to put this here, and wait till these two find these things, and then we get to see these two personalities conflict and how they come to a resolution naturally. Is really fun.
Cool. Okay, based on all that, we've got wargs, we have advantages on terrain, emotional conflict. What other elements can we actually place for the dungeon masters who might be playing this?
Okay, so elements to place in that world.
Specifically, Act 2 in this
in this combat, or moving past it further into the adventure?
This combat.
I think probably providing a map of a likely area for that combat, and I think adding topographical elements if you want. You say these are higher difficulty enemies that, if they're in any significant number, are going to present a real deadly threat to these adventurers. So here's an area of trees, reclaimed machines, and these wargs don't have a climb speed. Maybe they have disadvantage because they're four-legged and they don't have hands. They have disadvantage on climb checks to get up there. So if you can jump up and hit them with ranged attacks, cantrips, spells, bow and arrow, you totally rearrange the nature of this fight. I think putting those elements in there is really significant, and I think maybe adding one warg with the capability of speech to add a role-playing element. So there's someone being like, you don't have any stake in this town. You're just a traveler. Why don't you get back on the road?
Or you have even somebody who's been affected by the warped area, who is like some sort of creature of nature who's been warped, who now has control over these wargs.
Ooh, yeah.
So you see the merging of those two worlds, what they've done to life and how life has been created in that.
That's amazing.
Ooh, like some weird burned up dryad who got scarred by like horrible magic and is like commanding the wargs and is like, a sort of ashen dryad specter.
I like doing that kind of thing of saying, so cool. And even setting up that person and saying, like, not even seeing these adventurers as a threat and just kind of warning them of, like, you're out of your element, you're over your head, and just presenting themselves, having some dialogue, and then sending their hounds out and leaving. And being overconfident in their own way to just leave and think they can't handle this, get them out of here, and then setting up that kind of tension and drama as well.
Extremely dope. I love that.
And machines. I want a machine. Can we put a machine in there too?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
You've already had like that steampunk
that's so
merge.
Cool. Yeah.
You got tanks and everything.
I think especially if you're playing with people for the first time that are maybe you're trying to ease into role playing, I think it can help to add a comic relief character. And depending on the tone you're setting, maybe you want a really serious campaign, I would make like just a non-verbal dwarven golem that they can release from branches somewhere. So it's not like got a silly voice, it's not like ruining the tone, but maybe it like doesn't know the right direction to walk.
One of the ones you're climbing on all of a sudden speaks and it's like, I'm stuck, get me out.
So you add kind of an NPC for people to like kind of sharpen their fangs on with role playing. There's something that they can like.
I was gonna say that's to me one of the most important elements. I will not go into any combat situation without lots of NPCs. I prefer doing NPCs for story instead of narration as much as possible. The show I'm currently doing is the opposite of that, but I do prefer to have NPCs giving the story and building the world and creating as many colorful characters as you can to get your characters excited about all the people they might meet on their journey.
Yeah, okay, so I would like to rewind just a little bit and go back to Act 1 in that social. Can we just like develop that a little bit more?
Sure.
Because I feel like giving them the training here is going to help them take that next step into Act 2.
Great. So they've all come together in the tavern. There's the general and the barkeep. You overhear the general and what is it, the barkeep wanting some sort of element of like, we need help, what are we gonna do?
Yeah, and I think what you can do is what you as a DM should do, and this is whether you're buying a module from a store or you're developing your own adventure. Adventure is rooted in player character motivation. So what you need to do is, all of your notes are well and good, but if your notes aren't based in what the PCs say they want, they're useless. So what I would do is assume that you'll have some, based on your world background, that you'll have some people that have made people that want the banner for reasons of loyalty and cause. You have other people that are affiliated with the forest. And if someone hasn't created a strong motivation, I think it's your job to help work through that with them. An easy one is money. Maybe the barkeep can just say, look, this is the right thing to do to help the town. And also, I got a stack of gold back here that'll really set you up for life if you can just help us get this banner back.
It really is the easiest way to motivate new players.
Yeah.
You get a reward. You know,
Cool.
You get a reward out of that.
And then we can have the different tables have different people with,
for sure.
you know, this table has maybe a mixture of people from both cities, and then other tables can be more, maybe there's like a bunch of veterans that they can talk to. That way you're piecing together information, and that gives the players a buy-in. They're like, oh, I suddenly do care because look at the effect this had on all these people.
You have the person with the scarred face in the corner who's blind, who happens to tell you about the wolves out in the forest.
Love that.
And, you know, and don't go out there.
One table has a really under-equipped town militia, like janky barrel-top wooden shields and just like quarterstaffs. And there's some like 16-year-old kid that they're like buying a drink for because he's just joined. And they're like, you'll do all right, lad. And then you're like, this kid's dead. No way is this
Those are the first bodies you find out of the forest.
Fantasy red shirts.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, moving forward. Act 3.
So we've met our big bad, we've met our basic levels, now we're getting close to the banner, right? So you're gonna have to reintroduce the big bad.
Yes, so I think there's another exploration chapter that's like non-combat as they get from that warg encounter to like the keep or ruined fortress in the woods. Maybe you have some like optional encounter that could go combat or could go role-playing, like, oh, there's like a big old bear who's been like stuck up with arrows and partially burned from the war, like some legendary kind of bear, and they can either, if you have a druid who makes a good animal handling check, that's a social encounter. If you mess up, maybe that's another combat encounter. And in the fortress, I think, like, you map it out, goblin soldiers, reclaimed, maybe one or two of them are a little bit more badass than goblins because they have some reclaimed, stolen, scavenged technology from the war. Maybe like one other goblin who's like a cleric or warlock or something like that is like a sort of leader for them. That would be like a lieutenant sub boss to the dryad big bad.
Right. So the dryad still you're building up for later, and I would like to create some sort of story element there where, again, I'd have to improv this based on what my players' worries were and my players' kind of backstories going into that, especially if we didn't have but like one character who was of the forest, or even no characters of the forest. When you find this banner, and even though they are bad guys and they are doing bad things, also letting it be known that this banner being right here in this spot is keeping the armies from overrunning this part of the forest and allowing the forest to still have some semblance of forest. And if this banner gets taken away or removed, then all of a sudden you're dooming the forest itself because the armies will overrun it. So even though you want to win, there's an element of conflict in that of, you know, well, something bad will happen unless we come to a compromise story-wise to defeat the bad guys, but still keep the forest intact.
I like that. And it really makes the players have to like make a choice, a real choice.
Yeah.
I'm all about choices for beginners too. I want them to realize, like, and also tell them, like, no, there is no right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. Whatever you come up with, that's the story. And you're building the story as we go forward.
Yeah.
One of the things I found with beginner players is they need that sense of accomplishment. So say they, at any point, one of these is going to have a problem, or two of them is going to have a problem, right? You got the two cities and the fortress. So what do you do for the players to give them a sense of accomplishment? Like, whatever choice isn't wrong, but also this is the good thing that happened. Like, how do you give that to them, that emotion to them?
I'm going to be completely honest. This is my biggest struggle because I'm not going to say I'm a mean GM. I am I'm a dark GM. And I want those things to be earned and felt. And I do have a problem with sometimes first level players because I will make it feel at first like you didn't get anything out of it, but then I'd have them go back to the town and maybe there's someone who was saved from your actions, or you see the town thriving, or now trade routes have opened back up and people get food again. But it'd feel very dark at first and really solemn. So I have a fault with this a lot, and I get accused of this a lot, of just like, man, it was really sad. What the... Why? But that's just me.
Yeah, no,
I
it's cool.
think that there's always a kind of like that Indiana Jones bag of sand trick with accomplishment, which, or to use another weird metaphor, it's almost like that, like she swallowed the spider to catch the fly kind of mentality, where I think you can get away with giving a strong, firm attaboy pat on the back with a sense of accomplishment, and also in the same breath introduce, here's what happened as a result of your choice that leads to the next adventure.
Yeah.
So something along the lines of like, let's say they make the choice, they don't want the armies to overrun the place, so they like leave the banner in the forest, or they're like, this has to stay here. Or maybe it's similarly like if it stays in the town, like that does the same. Like as long as it's in this geographical region, it will do what it's supposed to do. So now they bring it to the town, and now all these mystical forces have their eyes set on the town. Like, cool, left it in the town, it's there, and now that dryad, if she survived, or her sisters, like maybe she was weird and ashy and partially undead, you kill her, cool. Her 6 sisters from the 7-tree grove, they didn't care that she was undead, and now they just want revenge on you, and the whole forest is going to move against this town. So like, it's that thing of like, you did exactly what you said you wanted to do, the town cheers, or like you figure out some way to bring it back to one of your host cities, cool. You get a big medal and a commendation and your big cheers, and you get word that town was overrun.
Yeah, totally.
And it's just, it's, you know, it's like, cool. It's very much, I think it is, I think you need some darkness.
You have to.
I think so as well.
You need the bittersweet. So it's that thing of like, hey, you can get what you want, and also the world's complex.
And I will say, from a show producer standpoint, I'm excited that Game of Thrones has gotten popular enough that when new people come in, they're like expecting it to be dark, and that they're not going to get everything that they want. Whereas some, I think just years ago, there was more of an expectation of like, "Hala, we're all going on an adventure and everything's going to be great." And then the more popular Game of Thrones goes, like, I guess people are going to die, you know? It's just going to get dark, and that makes it more exciting for me personally, but yeah, 100%.
This is an amazing adventure. Well done. That was super fast. Oh my gosh. I think that was the fastest I've ever had one made. But there is one last. Actually, there's a couple different last. What are the names of the towns?
Oh.
This is for us to build.
So you have like dwarf, machine-y, grizzled place, and then one that feels like a little more magical, maybe druid, maybe like elf dwarf war is kind of a classic if there's like an elven and dwarven power that are like at war with each other.
I know so little about these types
Conflict
of worlds.
of the Ancients?
All of mine comes from Thor, so I'm like something Niflheim, Muldalheim.
Yeah, just name it. Okay, so we've got Niflheim. Niflheim, that's one.
Niflheim is our dwarf place. They're a little bit more Scandinavian-style dwarves.
Don't sue me, Marvel.
Oh, is that an actual?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, well, we won't. Well, how about we call it Teffelheim?
Teffelheim?
Sure.
Great,
Yep.
Teffelheim.
Okay, that's the dwarf
Just
one.
makes me think of truffles.
That's their delicacy there. Yeah. Okay, what is the spell one?
Let's call it Khyru. K-H-Y-R-U.
Yeah, there's some mystery there.
Okay, and the last, what is the name of this adventure?
The Fallen Banner.
Perfect. The Fallen Banner. Thank you guys for creating the Fallen Banner. That was pretty amazing and super fast. We are going to end the show.
Wow.
I know. You guys gave everybody your tips on how to dungeon master, and you made a game, and I'm super excited to have done this with you. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online?
You can find my stuff on dropout.tv or College Humor. I'm the DM of Dimension 20, which you can go check out right now. We have a new side quest that's coming out, and you can find me on Twitter at BrennanLM or on Instagram at Brennan Lee Mulligan.
You can find me on Twitter at Zach Eubank, Zacheubank, and I GM live every Monday on a show called Kolok 1991.
Heck yeah.
We hope you guys enjoyed today's Storyteller's Guide. Let us know how you use the Pillars of Adventure in your stories. Tag us on your Twitter and Instagram at Idle Champions and at Gilding Light. Till we meet again, dear storytellers. Thanks again for watching the Storyteller's Guide here on Gilding Light. If you like what we're doing here, go ahead and click the subscribe button and follow us on @GildingLight on all the socials. Want to hang out with me on Idle Champions? Go to idlechampions.com/storyteller. Until next time, play, dream, and tell all the stories.